Hey, I've been working with a lot of candidates recently about how to prepare them for interviews. It seems to be that this is the season of interviews. And for anyone out there who's going to give an interview over the next few days and weeks and months, I thought I'd share a little piece of insight that we've discovered at Kraftshala that I think can really unlock your true potential and help you do better in these job interviews. So we've discovered a mistake that almost all young professionals and students are doing. And the thing is that they are preparing for these interviews the way they prepare for their exams. Yeah. And an interview is not like an exam in a whole host of ways, but I'm going to give you 4 clear ways of how an interview differs from an exam. Yeah. And the fourth one is probably the most important one, but I need to give you the first 3 before I get to the fourth. So the first thing is, in an exam, the syllabus is set by an authority, some prescribed body which deems that this is in syllabus and this is out of syllabus. But when it comes to an interview, you have the capability to decide the syllabus on your own. There is a little bit of constraint that they'll ask you stuff that is related to the job in some way or the other. But by putting stuff on your CV and saying the kinds of things that you really want to talk about in your introduction, you can really set the syllabus of the interview based on what is interesting and relevant for you. And so therefore, even if you have a little bit of depth in a few areas, that's enough to crack an interview. Whereas in an exam, you need to cover a lot of different spaces. So that's the first big difference. The second big difference is, in an exam, there is one correct answer. Yeah, this is the right answer. But in an interview, there is no right or wrong answer in a lot of questions. What matters is what approach you take in, how you approach it, and so on and so forth, right? So in a lot of cases, it's not about getting the answer right as much as it is about showing that you're not giving up. And that matters a fair bit. The third big difference is what the evaluator's intent is. Now, in an exam, the evaluator's intent is to give you a percentage of marks, right? So if you get 8 out of 10 questions, you have 80%. But if you got 9 out of 10 questions, then you get 90%. In an interview, on the other hand, that's not how it works. You can get 9 out of 10 questions right, or even 10 out of 10 questions right. But if you show the right approach, if you show the right set of competencies that the recruiter really cares for, then you are through the interview. Yeah. So what do I mean by these competencies? I mean things like recruiters care for resilience. They care for whether someone has the right communication skills, whether someone has a user-centric attitude, which means they start from the user. They care for whether you're able to break down a complex problem into a simple set of problems, right? Whether you come up with the right solution or not, that's a different point. But they care for these kinds of things, how you approach a problem, how you've approached problems in the past. And all of those things are competencies that they really are checking in the interview. And that brings me to the all-important fourth point. How do you prepare for an exam? If you ask any student, 9 times out of 10, they'll give you the answer that the best, most optimal strategy to prepare for an exam is to look at the last year's questions. You look at the last 5 years, 10 years, you get an idea what kind of questions are there. In many cases, the same questions are asked again. In an interview, if you try and take the same strategy, if you try and just look at the last year's questions, you're going to be in for a disappointment. And the reason is not that there isn't any repetition or that you can't learn from last year's questions. There is consistency, but the consistency is not in questions, but in competencies. What they cared for last year's in competencies are the same competencies that they care for. But the candidates are different, right? So how I check resilience in one candidate will be specific to that person's profile and will be different for another person's profile. And even more critically, a lot of the times recruiters tend to put forward questions which are top of their mind. So let's say someone is facing a business problem over the last 3 to 6 months. They'll give that business problem to you. And then they'll see how you approach it. Next year, if they're interviewing for the same role, there'll be another problem that will be top of their mind, right? So they tend to, the questions vary, but the competencies are the same. So as long as you can figure out, look, these are the competencies that recruiters really care for, and this is the context of that business, then you can really predict the kinds of questions that are likely to be asked, and therefore you can improve your preparation. Yeah. summarize all of this into one thing, the reality is that if you don't know the right answer in an exam, you can't ask for help. But in an interview, you can ask for help, and you can ask for help from the person sitting in front of you now and on a screen, but someone who's asking the question itself, right? You can engage them in a conversation, because at the end of the day, an interview is not about getting the right answer. It's not about wasting time thinking, oh, what was that exact word that I was trying to look for. It's about having a conversation. So they give you a clue, you're not able to think about it. Bring them in the conversation. Tell them, look, what did you think about it, right? Get them in the conversation. Tell them, look, I'm not able to remember this. What do you think would be the right approach? And so on and so forth. If you give an answer and you see the interviewer's face not responding positively, you can ask them, look, do you have a different point of view? Is there another way that I can approach this answer? And in that way, you can rescue the situation. So while it's almost impossible to ace every exam, and yes, it is almost impossible to ace every interview, but if you follow the process of preparing for it like a conversation and not like an exam, you can substantially increase your chances. So that's my 2 cents for you for today. Good luck.